Good evening, fellow blade enthusiasts, and thank you for tuning in to another Studio GDT review. I'm very excited to announce that we have a new manufacturer to review tonight in the form of ShadowDancer Swords. Wanted to take a quick moment to say thank you to ShadowDancer Swords for sending out a couple of samples to this new and up-and-coming channel. It's manufacturers like you that help me keep this project up and going. Tonight we're going to be taking a look at their new Basic Musashi. This is an exclusive review in a way in that it has not been reviewed in the sword review sphere yet. So what is new about the Basic Musashi? It has been upgraded to 1095 differentially hardened steel. So that is a nice upgrade at the price point that it has stayed at. When we go over all of the upgrades that are included at that price point, I think you will be pleasantly surprised. So ShadowDancer is not without their own entry-level budget line. They do have the Tyrannosaurus series of swords that are not typical construction, but if someone's looking at getting into reproduction Japanese sword ownership and wants to be able to take care of them in the traditional ways, the Basic Musashi sword is really a feature-rich katana that is worth taking a look at. So I was excited to get it. It was really fun to have, and there's some interesting things about it. It's not without a couple of things to nitpick here and there. That's the whole point of the review. But I think at the end, you'll see that it is worth its value. So let's go ahead and take a look. Got to get this stuff out of the way first. I am an amateur student in Japanese swordsmanship. I am an amateur collector of Japanese reproduction swords. I'm an amateur historian. There's a whole lot of amateur going on here. So take everything that I say with a grain of salt. The sword in this review was sent as a review sample. That wouldn't change anything that I would say to you, but if you think that it might, feel free to tune out if you would like. So here we go. Taking a look at ShadowDancer's website, you can see the price point of $2.99 for the Basic Musashi and a little blurb about what makes it unique, followed up by the detailed specifications on this. One thing I will point out is the weight, especially on the model with Bohi. This is an extremely light sword. The fittings are lightweight, the sword is lightweight. It is very, very maneuverable. What you end up getting for that price point is a sword that looks extremely squared away, has very, very clean lines, overall strong fit and finish. One thing I will call out is the difficulty in photographing red. I've noticed it with this sword. The red on the website isn't necessarily what the red over a cell phone photo looks like, isn't necessarily what the red in person looks like. So just be in mind if you're dealing with swords anywhere, because I've had this issue happen with other manufacturers, that the red might not be the red you think it might be. The tsuka is the beginning of what makes the Basic Musashi not so basic. You can see the very defined Haichi shape here, very, very clean ito, very clean lines to the fuchi, and the Koshirae is definitely not basic in my opinion. Here you can see how cleanly the Koshirae meets with the ito on the tsuka. It is the smoothest transition that I've ever felt, and literally the smoothest tsuka I've ever felt in the hand. So they did a really good job of blending the two surfaces in there, and the Koshirae feels great. The cracked earth or cracked paint scheme that you can see on the Koshirae and the fuchi is done well. It's clean, it's defined, but it doesn't have any sharp edges on it. But I want you to look at something else here, especially at something at this price point, and that's the brass shirodome that are included on this. It's just something that you don't normally see. Here again you can just see the uninterrupted lines from the wrap all the way to the Koshirae, and this tsuka features ShadowDancer's Hishigami Pro. I asked what's the difference between the Pro and the standard Hishigami, and they said that the Pro is tighter and that the diamonds are neater. I do have another sword that we'll be reviewing, and as far as the tightness is concerned, it's pretty similar, but I do think that the diamonds on this, as you can see, are very tight, and it does feel incredible. The Menuki was the one thing that I felt was a little bit out of place. It has more of a glossy finish to it. The rest of the furniture has a satin to a flat finish, so if I could recommend that they do anything different, I would just say that they would maybe blast that with a little bit of abrasive media and make it match the rest. A nicely fitted fuchi is shown here with the cracked earth or cracked paint design. One thing that ShadowDancer does that I absolutely love is the single Menuki pin. Now, it is drilled at an angle. You got to be careful with that, and you got to check your Menuki pins more often because the Nikago can bite into them a little bit more than something that's drilled straight. So if you haven't had an angled drill before, it's just something you might want to take a look at. Did I forget to mention that this beautiful looking tsuka is wrapped in imported Japanese cotton? This is another strong feature that the basic Musashi has that kind of blows away other swords at that price point, and you 100% can absolutely feel a difference between synthetic silk or the cotton that you would get in other providers. It is a fantastic feeling tsuka in the hand, and this is, I think, all attributed to their design and, of course, the ito material itself. In disassembling the tsuka, I noticed that there was a little bit of a burr on the Nikago from the drilling for the Menuki, and there were some metal shavings that were stuck in between the Samegawa. I did bring it up to ShadowDancer, and I thought, hey, you know, this might be something to look at. They stated that, you know, it was an anomaly, but that they would make sure that they would take a look at that issue on any swords going forward. So I don't have any reason to believe that they wouldn't do that, and I don't really think it's an issue. Taking a look at the tsuka removed here, you can see that it uses real Rayskin Samegawa panels. You can also see the various fittings here, so let's take a look at those a little bit closer. I know there's a lot of conversation about Company B using Company A's furniture and then maybe it making its way over to Company C, but as far as I'm concerned, to quote the great Eddie Izzard, did you put a flag in it? If you don't mark it, if you don't stamp your name on it, it's just a different culture over there, and expect it to be used and be copied. So on ShadowDancer's website, they clearly state that they've been given access to Zisei's bucket of parts, and you can clearly see that it's marked on the fuchi here, Zisei. So good on them, because they put a flag in it. You can see that the Habaki is a very beefy brass unit, not prone to deforming. More important than that, though, is the machigane that's installed inside there to meet up with the hamachi. This is going to provide a much tighter and solid fit than a standard mass-produced universal Habaki will. The Seppa die is smaller than the overall size of the Seppa. Doesn't have anything to do with functionality. Maybe it might bother you. Really, it doesn't bother me in this instance, but it is something that I noticed. I found the fit of the tsuka to the fuchi to the Seppa to the tsuba to the Seppa to the Habaki to be absolutely fantastic with beautiful alignment. It was one of the best aligned pieces that I've seen. And this is a, using air quotes here, basic sword. The alignment awesomeness didn't stop there. It also had a fantastic fit with the saya. There was no filing required. It was ready to go right out of the box. And now let's move on to the saya. Now this is where ShadowDancer could get really basic here. You've got a plastic Koguchi, you've got a plastic Kojiri, you've got a plastic Kurigata, but then all of a sudden they throw in brass Shidodome and they're fixed. They don't fall out. Imagine that. So again, hard to call it basic. I'll say one more thing about the saya. It's often said that in the Chinese reproduction swords, the saya are all oversized, possibly as a means to be able to mass produce them and fit a wider variety of swords, and that their dimensions are typically significantly larger than what Nihonto dimensions would be. I find this to be true most of the time. I will give ShadowDancer kudos because the saya on at least 2 swords that I've seen of theirs has been very, very small, narrow, tapered. The sword has minimal rattle on it, and it's kind of a nice feeling, something that I'm not used to. Now on to the fun stuff. As mentioned earlier, this new version of the basic Musashi features a 1095 differentially hardened steel blade. It is a shinogi zukuri shape with bohi and a clay-tempered hamon and chukasaki. Taking a look at this here, you can see that it's somewhat difficult to photograph the Maru steel blade in the basic lighting conditions that I had. The overall shape of the sword, or sugata, is a tori-zori shape, with the majority of the curvature occurring at the center of the sword. The blade features some niku. It's not on the heavy side, it's not on the light side, it's just right. The blade flats were nice and flat, and the bohi was pretty smooth. Now, the hamon on this is advertised as sanbon sugi, or 3 cedars, and really that's the only advertised specification of this sword that I would have a little bit of an issue with. I can't really see sanbon sugi in this. Normally that is classified as a peak followed by 2 small valleys followed by another peak in a repetitive pattern. We don't really get that pattern here, and there's also some slant on the ashi on this as well. It's not a bad hamon at all. I actually think it's got a lot of interesting stuff going on in it, but I'm not quite sure I'd call it sanbon sugi. The next issue I would have would be with the mechanical mirror polishing on this. Now you have to keep in mind this is designed as a basic sword. It's in the name, and they're trying to give you access to certain features with the basic sword that you wouldn't have with others. So the polish is something that maybe went and took a back seat. One thing if I could recommend that they might want to take a little bit at is the machine polisher kind of biting into it and jumping it. I think there are ways with a basic sword to be able to not have these bite marks into it. The other thing I would do is the cross polishing on the cosmetic yokote. It's kind of odd to me because it's at an angle. I'm used to it being, you know, perpendicular or something. The angular cross polishing is a little bit jarring to me. So if I could make a recommendation, it would be to make sure that the machine doesn't jump when polishing the blade, and that you do a perpendicular counter polish on the kasagi. The blade produces significant tachikaze. It was a little bit breezy outside, so it was hard to pick up, but trust me, it is a loud sword. No sharpness issues out of the box. There was no secondary bevel present. The monouchi was in perfect condition and had no real issues moving through printer paper with ease. I think it would be a very, very good cutter. So at $2.99, is there really more bang for the buck here? I say absolutely. This sword really impressed me. You're going to get a Nihonto shaped and sized saya that is a good fit out of the box. You're going to get brass shirodome on both the kurigata and the Koshirae that don't come out. You're going to get imported Japanese cotton on the tsuka that has real Rayskin inlays on it. And then you're going to get a 1095 differentially hardened blade. Could the mirror polishing use some work? Sure, but if you're going to actually cut with this and use it heavily, you're going to be scuffing up that polish anyway. So is it a big deal? I don't really think so. There are way more positives to this than negatives at the price point. Feeling the tsuka in the hand alone is enough, I think, to convert most people. So all in all, I think ShadowDancer has a winner.